Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome back for those of you who are returning. Very excited to be here with you again and very excited about our conversation today. So I'm Kathy Liska from the Center for Coaching Certification and Pandora, go ahead.
I'm Pandora Ray, and I've trained with the Center for Coaching Certification, as well as Coach 123. And I'm about this close from getting my PCC. So I'm really excited to be here and share this experience with you today.
Yeah, that's going to be so wonderful. So the stars of the conversation today, we have a graduate from the Center for Coaching Certification, Vonetta Wade. She's also written a chapter in one of our Coaching Perspectives books. And then with her is her daughter, Sierra Jackson. And I love the combination of what these two are going to bring to this conversation. It is going to be awesome. So I'm going to invite each of you to introduce yourselves and then we'll dive in.
Okay, so my name is Sierra Jackson. I am a licensed clinical social work supervisor. So I'll start with just giving you guys a little background on the populations that I worked with and served. So currently I work with veterans, I work with adolescents, young adults, and the geriatric population. So my role is a therapist. So a large part of my role is providing therapies to my clients and providing education on diagnoses, self-care, different ways, different coping mechanisms, and just being there as a guide or a tool on someone's journey.
Awesome. Thanks, Sierra.
All right. My name is Vonetta Wade, and I am a certified life coach. Like Kathy said, I graduated from her training program, I think in 2017. And so I do life coaching as well as I'm an associate risk manager for an insurance company. And I also am a nonprofit leader. And so what I do as far as coaching is help clients to identify what it is they want to achieve and then help them to understand how to achieve those goals.
Awesome. Awesome. And the two of you have just an amazing story, an example. Vonetta shared some in the book about collaborating and serving clients with both roles at play. A thought is to first invite you to define your role specifically. What do you do? What is it that is your responsibility in that role? And then share that story. So what do you want us to know, Sierra, about your role as a mental health professional?
So my role is as a mental health professional is to build a autonomous relationship between the client and myself. So my biggest thing is self-determination. So I want to help the client. I don't want to push or put anything on the person. I want to help them with their goals. So we would start off by identifying things that they may have struggles with or barriers or challenges that they're facing. So we will then together work collaboratively to set treatment goals. With that being said, a large part of my role is providing psychoeducation on certain things like topics that you and I may be all familiar with, like stress management, coping mechanism, medication management, symptom management, mindfulness, meditation. It's just a large part of just trying to cope with life challenges, like even grief, just being a listener. I think of the biggest part about being a therapist is knowing how to listen and, helping your clients in that way. A lot of people want to be heard. So not just necessarily me providing the feedback, but just listening and being a helping ear, and also a lot of validation. So a large part of my role is just simply providing support for someone. And so that is what I enjoy the most. And that is it's what I love to do. So that pretty much sums up my role as a mental health professional, but also even dealing with things, something as difficult or, it's like suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation, all of those things too, but also being the person to maybe refer out to services or refer to a psychiatrist. So a large part also is referring when it's something that I cannot assist with. So that's a large part as well.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Vonetta, of course, I'm coach too, so I understand that role a little bit better. Talk about the role of coach for everyone else. Yeah. Mm.
So a coach partners with a client and have conversations with them about what it is that they want to achieve in life, whether that's a personal goal, a professional goal, or whatever it is that they want to do to get to a happy place in their life. And so my job is to be the sounding board, to be a strategic partner, to help them see things they may not see, as far as there may be some blockers that's in the way of them reaching their goals, and helping to remove those things, helping them to come to the realization of exactly what it is they want, how to remove the blockers and things like that. So I'm really just the person that is allowing them to be creative in that thought-provoking conversation and coming up with what it is that they're going to do to achieve their goals or to execute their plan. My areas of expertise, what I like really enjoy doing as a coach, is more, my niche is more around mindfulness, it's around life purpose, and also parent-child relationships.
Awesome. That's awesome. So it's fascinating. The main thing I heard stand out with Sierra, you talked about awareness, and then you talked about coping. So coping with so many different things they're dealing with. And then Vonetta, yeah, the awareness is there, and it's about the future and where they're going.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. 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 And the two of you have just an amazing experience, story, example of collaborating, where both the coach and the therapist are providing value, working with the client. So talk to us about that.
All right, so I'll give you an example. So Sierra and I, we're really, really close now. Like, we're like, she won't make a decision without asking me. You know, that's a huge deal, because usually parents don't know anything and mind your own business and things like that. But years ago, we struggled so badly in our relationship. It was constant bickering. It was just a lot of turmoil. It was just a lot of stress. We really just didn't know what to do. So we ended up seeking counsel from a pastor, and, you know, kind of started us on our journey of healing and getting better. I actually started therapy. There was some things that I went through in my life that I wasn't aware of that was impacting my relationships with my, you know, and my personal relationships with my children and things like that. And so I had some unpacking to do. I didn't know anything about therapy, coaching, anything. I was just in survival mode, trying to raise my kids, do the best I can. And it was this constant conflict with Sierra. We couldn't communicate, and it was just a really trying time. And I ended up going to therapy and learned about some of the things that, like, my triggers. Why is it that when certain things happen, I react this way, and how it was really impacting my kids. And I learned about some of the things were my coping mechanisms that I needed to let go of, because I'm not in that survival mode anymore. Like, you know, with just the struggles I went through as a teen parent and things like that. And so I found out on my journey that therapy did help. And so it really did put me on a journey of understanding how it was impacting my kids. And so I was becoming more aware. And so after a few years, I ended up starting a nonprofit organization to help more parents and teens. So Sierra was able to see how our story wasn't unique, and that all parents and teens, we both were able to see this, were on that journey. I think that what I learned mostly is that a lot of what we were going through had to do with me. It was the work that I needed to do, the internal work. And so anyway, we helped a lot of parents and kids through our nonprofit and things like that. So we did have a parent and child reach out to us, well, the parent did, and she was going through the same struggles, and we can see it. We could see how they interacted with each other. So she wanted us to help her, and I'm like, we're glad to do it. Like, at that point, Sierra was a therapist, and I had became a certified coach. And so we started working with them. And it was like looking at ourselves years ago. And so we were excited to actually help. And so Sierra brought the therapy perspective of the trauma that the mom experienced, how it was impacting her child. She was able to communicate in the way that the child was interested and understood that we know exactly what you're going through and how this is impacting you, and we're here to help. So that made her comfortable, and she felt like she could open up. And so we went on this journey with them, and I was more focused on, because I know there were some things that the mom wanted to focus on as far as starting a new career and her relationship with her partner and things like that. So I was able to kind of help her with those things while we were working with them together, as far as some activities that they can do to get past some of the things that were causing the conflict. So it worked. I feel like we really helped the mom come to like revelation and how it was impacting her, but it took both of us. It took our experience, number one, because we were experienced in what they were going through. And Sierra really had the mental health piece of it, and the patterns and the things that the mom couldn't see, the trauma and how she was imposing some things on her child. And then I was able to just help them with, okay, so these are the goals you guys have. Let's put the action plans, these are the goals, like following up that you guys reach this goal, so this is another goal, and just kind of help them through that whole process. So I'll pause there and let Sierra add her 2 cents.
Yeah, so a large part of my role was also having the ability to empathize, which I think was very important, because it was also from my personal experience, like going through these things with my mother. I think we had a difficult time as well, because I didn't really know how to express myself. I was not very assertive. It would come out, maybe a little aggressive, which would cause a lot of conflict or hostility. And obviously, you can't communicate or express your needs and being in that condition, being, upset like that. So a large thing too was just talking to the teen and also trying to educate her on ways to express herself, not, where you're yelling, but hey, like expressing yourself and using the I statement. So a large part of my role was pretty much educating. It's usually people think it's like this huge thing, but it really breaks it down to the basics. It's, hey, communicating. It's, hey, when I'm upset, understanding like this is not a time for me to talk, or, knowing that, because sometimes I think it's difficult for us to share things with our parents because we don't know how they will react. So a lot of the times kids, teenagers, they're going through a lot of things, but people don't assume that, because it's like, well, the adults are the ones that have these lives where it's just so complex and complicated. But also teens go through a lot too, but I would say that they may not have the best ways of necessarily expressing or coping with it. So a large part of my role was also getting her to get comfortable with expressing herself. It's easy to say, hey, like, hey, express yourself. So a large part was also role playing, like, bringing real life scenarios of things that they very, like very intense or complicated or uncomfortable things, like talk about those things and try to role play it and work it out. So that's one way that I was able to work with the team, but also to get her to understand that her feelings were very valid, because I think sometimes it's invalidating when parents are upset and they're like, oh, well, get over it. But, we teens have feelings too. So that's why I was able to empathize with her, but also get her to communicate with mom, because I think there's a strategic way to get your parents to kind of listen to you, but it takes a lot of self-awareness, a lot of patience, and just being calm and knowing how to do it. And so she had a lot of other stuff going on too that mom didn't know about. So we worked on that. We worked on the coping mechanisms for. We worked on how to even be assertive in friendships and having boundaries. So it was a lot of things that were going on. So you have your personal life, and then you have your life at home, but then you're in the home. So these are where the things are happening. So these are like you have stressors outside of the home and inside of the home. And then same thing with mom. So then there's conflict. So really it's just getting both of them to be more aware of like, hey, when I'm feeling this way, this is what I need. And when you're feeling this way, what is it that you need? So having those conversations, asking those questions, and not making assumptions, but trying to work together as, to improve the relationship and become better and start that journey to heal. So that pretty much summed it up. And I think it, in the end, I saw the progress. I saw, she had the ability to express herself, and, better coping mechanisms. So overall, I was really pleased with the outcome.
Yeah,
That's a
and I
wonderful
think,
story.
yeah, the same thing with mom. I saw a change in her too, because she was able to realize how the things she went through, how she was projecting it on her daughter. And so it was causing her to have certain behaviors that was impacting her daughter. And so she became more aware. Became self-aware of that impact. And at the same time, she was able to start a new career. So we were helping with both those things, like Sierra said, the things that were happening at home and then their personal goals and things like that. So we definitely did see change there. And so then even a few years later, I'm following up on how are you guys doing? And like, she's great, she's in nursing school, like we're doing wonderful. So it's just really good to be able to take our experience and be authentic and vulnerable enough to help the parent and the child that we're talking about in this situation.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So in hearing that personal experience, I'm wondering if you can both talk to, there are lots of concepts here that overlap between therapy and coaching. So I'm wondering if you could speak to the other person. Like, I don't know who wants to go first. I'll pick on you, Sierra, just because Netta went last. What do you see your mom doing as a coach that is different than what you do as an LCSW supervisor, a social worker?
So I think what I see my mom doing differently is, I mean, it's pretty much preparing for the future. So it's outside, anything pretty much outside of mental health. So for instance, if someone is having a difficult time with life direction, like no purpose, where to go, it's helping that person find that purpose. I would say a life coach may be better equipped for that. I can see, I mean, I've personally seen my mom help with that. Like she has helped guided me, a few of my friends, actually, people that we know. She can provide that guidance. So it's not necessarily mental health related, but just in general to make it very broad about like life, or um just if someone is stuck and they just don't have the motivation or the determination, I believe that she probably has the ability to kind of help with that, because I'm sure she's been there before. Or maybe we've all been there where we don't have that motivation, but sometimes you need that driver. You need to talk to someone who has experienced the same thing and has the ability to kind of push you forward. So I would say she definitely has that. She can definitely help with that.
And Vonetta, same thing on the other side. What do you see Sierra doing in her trained professional role that's unique to what she does?
First of all, I want to say that I'm so very proud of my daughter. She has come a long way in reaching her goals, and just to be on here having this conversation with you is really emotional, because we've been through so much. So I'm very proud of you, Sierra.
Thank you.
So what I see Sierra and the role that she and other mental health professionals play is helping to remove the mental block, right? So we all may have goals, but if we're dealing with a broken relationship, an abusive relationship, grief, just trauma and all those things, there's some block there. It's a block. So I may want to become a hairstylist. I may want to go back to school to get my degree. I may want to move to another state. Those are like life goals where a life coach can help. But if I'm stuck in my trauma and the abuse and all the things I've been through, I can't even see clear enough. And it impacts the creativity. When you're going through things, you're not as creative because you have this mental block, and you can't, and it's so much in your headspace. It's so much, and you want to move forward and you can't. So talking to Sierra and mental health therapy therapists will help to, I think Kathy said it, take something that's real big, maybe like a big problem, and making it smaller, so that that person can see you can just walk over or step over. It's not this big mountain that it felt like before you started therapy, and we talked about the things that's been impacting you mentally. Now we've made it smaller. And so now you can walk through the door or step over the step and then start focusing on those goals that you have because you've been able to get past the blockers. And that's pretty much what I see them doing.
Wow.
Nice. It's to me, the big thing that comes out of the conversation is there's a time and a place for each.
Mhm.
And sometimes that time and place overlaps, and sometimes it's one then the other. And that's okay. Whatever it is that's going to work and serve that person makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah, and I have an example of a client that I was working with that was dealing with both, right? So there's a death in the family, just other stuff, not happy at work, just all these things. So there was the mental health part of it. And then the person had goals to change the situation that they were in at that moment because they needed to change the situation. And so what I did, so even though I knew that that person had a mental block and needed to work with a mental health professional, because that's not where my expertise is in dealing with grief and things like that, I did recommend as a part of the plan that we came up with, the action plan to get to where this person wanted to go. A part of it was, the goal was to seek a mental health therapist. And that's what they did. And so they went through their mental health journey with the therapist. And then we continued our coaching sessions and set up the goals, the personal life goals of how I'm going to get out of this job. What can I do to relieve my stress and my anger because of the situation I am, how it's impacting my family. And so, so they dealt with the therapist and dealt with me. I was aware of them working with the therapist. I don't know if the therapist was aware of them working with me, but at the end of that journey, I saw the difference. I saw the, like, the person became less emotional, and it was more like, okay, I think I'm making progress in this mental health space. And also I have goals on what to do next. So I'm doing these things together. And so instead of me saying, okay, well, you go deal with the mental health therapist first and you go remove that blocker and then you come to me, we pretty much were working together, even though the therapist may not have known, but the client was able to reach both of those goals. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's just such a great example. So I'm curious what your tips are, and I'm going to come at it from two different perspectives. Sierra, what are your tips to coaches in terms of how they can identify when a client is appropriately going to be served by a mental health professional? And then Vonetta, what are your tips for mental health professionals of when it's appropriate to send the client on to coaching?
Okay. So I'll go first. I think one of the best ways of assessing that is asking, like when you first, like in the initial session, just asking them like what their goals are, what their current stressors and challenges are. And usually I feel that if they're already reaching out for life coaching or something like that, they're probably ready to take the step where they may be transparent with what's happening with them. So even asking, and it's not that you're like overstepping or, trying to be like a mental health professional, but it's more so just assessing, knowing what you're getting yourself into. So even starting with asking like, hey, what are some current life stressors, or how do you manage things? Like when things get hard, what does that look like? And usually initially people will probably be transparent with what's happening with them, but if not along the way, I think you can see it, or you may be able to assess it as you're working with this person. You can tell usually when someone is under distress, they may be late all the time, or they may be really guarded or not just engaged. And so that's a starter conversation as well, just to try to recognize anything, just to try to be able to identify like, hey, like I noticed this, or so it's even just asking, them like, hey, it's being able to, be comfortable with being transparent and say, hey, like I noticed that, when we're in the sessions, you appear a little tearful, because I mean, a lot of people will pretty much present, or they will show you kind of what's happening or what they're going through the more that you have conversation with them, or the more time that you guys are spending together. So I would say being able to identify, hey, current stressors, or like, are they engaged at your sessions? Or even if they just come and tell you like, hey, I'm dealing with this, and that, like they may tell you like, I'm dealing with grief, I'm dealing with this, I just lost someone, I lost my job, those kind of things. Those people may not necessarily be ready. It's not like a universal thing. So it's circumstantial and of course individualized. So it's really just being able to identify and assess and see like, hey, is this person appropriate? So I would say first, just starting with them, checking in, but also using your judgment based on the conversations that you have with the person and the things that they disclose to you.
Yeah. So some of the clues I'm hearing in what you're saying, some of them will be self-aware enough to be able to point to anxiety, grief, those kinds of things, maybe even depression. I don't know. The other thing I'm hearing is the clues, not showing up on time, not really knowing what they want to work on or work toward, struggling to get going in the coaching conversation. Okay, is that the right modality for them?
Correct. And but also in response to that, sometimes I think taking that first step, even with therapy, some people are very nervous. So
Yeah.
it's trying to determine the difference between, okay, am I nervous because this is a big thing and this is me opening up and actually expressing myself, or is there something else? Is there an underlying issue? Like, is this past just me being nervous? Is this person actually dealing with something or struggling with something right now? So it's being able to know the difference between the two, which is why I think like even asking like an initial assessment, like asking someone like, how they're doing or what's going on with their lives, or are there, even their experience like with therapy, or if they've had, if there are other needs in their lives outside of the life coach perspective. And I think most people are pretty honest about it. But if not, again, I think you could probably tell when you're working with them, and you might be able to assess based on the judgment. So I think, yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. And Vonetta, what are your tips for a therapist or a licensed social worker in terms of knowing, okay, this person's ready to move on toward coaching?
I would say, because the main thing is is removing, as a professional therapist, is helping to remove the blockers. So if you see that there are no blockers, and now this person is more focused on, well, I want to go back to school, or I just need resources, or I need motivation, or I need just insight, or if it's more just about how do I go about achieving my goals, and less of I'm not mentally there to be able to achieve those goals. I think it's more, so I would say it's more around those lines. So what are they asking for? Are they asking you, or what are the conversations about? Is it more about the mental state, or is it just, okay, so I have these goals, and I know how I've reached the first one. So now how do I reach the second one? So it's more, to me, that's more life coachy, as opposed to you're still talking to a therapy about something that's not really, and I'm not saying that a therapy couldn't help with life goals, because I'm sure they can do both. But I think it's more so, okay, we've removed the blockers, you're building your confidence, you just need a little motivation, you need someone who's been through maybe some that can help you move across the country, or somebody that can help you reach this, go back to school or something like that. I think it's more along those lines of identifying or coming to the realization that there is nothing else that I can do from a mental space. It's more about just this client reaching their goals. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
So it's like this continuum. If I
Yeah.
adjust what I said earlier, okay, there's a time and a place for therapy, and it's, I'm going to deal with some issues, some past things, what's gone on, and start equipping them for the coping and moving into their life. And then it bleeds over into the coaching side of it, where now the focus really is on future goals and how they're going to get there.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's
It's more
awesome.
about the motivation and the follow-up. So yeah, so they're ready to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, described as sort of the opportunity. What's the opportunity going forward?
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Closing thoughts, everyone, on what you want people to be aware of or notice from our conversation today.
Am I going first or you see? I'll go first. There are times in life when you may just need a little help. And the biggest thing, the best thing that I have ever done for me and my family was to go to therapy. What happens to us when we're younger or what we were born into, we have no control over that. But as we get older and we know that our relationships aren't functioning the right way, I'm miserable at work, everything around me is in chaos, I think that's a sign to try to identify what is going on with you. It could be that you're dealing with some trauma, you're dealing with something that you haven't overcome. The relationship that you were in has impacted you, and now it's impacting your, like I said, relationships or your job or your happiness or something like that. And so if you get to that point or you're feeling stuck or you're looking at everyone else and everyone else seems to be moving forward in life and reaching their goals, I think it's a good idea to just think about maybe seeing a therapist, like just someone to talk to. A lot of times we have stuff in our heads and it seems really big. But the moment you have a conversation with a therapist or someone who can help you understand why you do the things you do, it could change your life. And that's exactly what it did for me. Once I worked with a therapist, I was able to see the impact that I had on my children. And I was able to identify behaviors, change those behaviors, and change our relationships. Because I did that work, and it's really internal work, because I did that work, I'm able to have a great relationship with my children and my granddaughter. So I don't have the best relationship with my mom because I feel like there's still some work to be done on that end. But I did my work to make sure that I can exist in a positive, loving environment with my children and my first grandchild, because I'm sure I'm going to have more. And I would just say, reach out to a therapist. And if you are just feeling stuck, you want to change jobs, or you want to move across the state, or you want to do something and you just have a little fear, or you may not be motivated, you don't know what the first step is to take, and you know, time is going by, it's a goal that you had 5 years ago and you're still saying, I want to do this, and you haven't done it, then it may be something that you want to reach out to a coach about. I just feel like life is short, and the longer you wait and just expect things to just change without you taking action, you're wasting a lot of time. And so I would encourage anyone out there, if you're having a mental block, if you're dealing with something that it seems heavy, to seek a therapist. And if it's something that you're just trying to get from point A to point B and you feel like you don't have any mental block and you're mentally okay, then seek a coach. Either way it goes, is going to improve your life.
You know what I'm hearing behind that story, Vonetta? How brave you were to go get that help and to do that work and make those changes. And seriously, both of you, how brave you are to be here and share that story. And to just openly, authentically be yourselves, be vulnerable, because you know it's going to make a difference to other people.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And I want to share one more thing. So because of the relationship that I now have with my daughter and my granddaughter, so I just wrote a book. It's called Mommy Has a Mommy Too. And it talks about how I'm explaining to my granddaughter that her mom has a mom, and the same things that she's doing with you, I did with her. And in the book, I talk about because it's dedicated to my granddaughter. And I'm like, I'm so happy to be on this journey of a positive and healthy relationship with the 3 generations. And that's so important to me. And so, yes, that I had to do my work to get to this point. And I'm so happy that I did. Egos aside, whatever happened in the past aside, like there is healing for families. And it's the greatest feeling in the world. My granddaughter adores me, I adore her, and we just have a great relationship, and I'm so happy about that.
Please pop that in the chat. How to get
Yes. Yeah, put the name of that book in there. My Mommy Has a Mom.
It's Mommy Has a Mommy Too. It's not
Mommy
published
Has
yet,
a
but it's
Mommy
coming.
Too.
But yeah.
Right.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And Sierra, what closing thought do you want to share?
So, closing thoughts that I have in my mother's words is proceeding through the uncomfortable. So, a lot of times there are tools, there are things out there to help us. We just have to take that first step. And even if you don't have the awareness, just take the step just to keep going, to take that first step to get the help or the assistance or the guidance. So, and also coming with an open mind, coming with the open mind because, sometimes we have this mindset like, hey, it's supposed to be this way or it should be this way, but that's usually not the case. So I would say the best tips is just coming with an open mind, be willing to learn, be eager to learn, be willing to be teachable, but also just proceed through the uncomfortable because that's usually the first step. It's uncomfortable talking about things that you've kept to yourself for a long time. It's very comfortable to stay somewhere because you're afraid of what could or what would happen. So those are some of the main things. And I think life coaches, therapists, mental health counselors, all of those things are, I'm glad that it's not, because back in the day it was really taboo. So these were not things that, we could necessarily be open with. So now that we have the opportunity to do that, I think it can help. I think it's great for our society and helps us move forward. And I think that we can be great and we should be trying to become our best selves. And sometimes we're not on that journey alone, just like I didn't get here alone. I got here from help. We had help from a pastor, someone who counseled us. I'd had help from my mom. I've had help from several people. I saw a therapist myself to kind of help me with my awareness. Same thing like with the life coach kind of helping me because at one point, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And sometimes, a therapist may not necessarily be able to help me with that piece, but a life coach could. And so all of these roles are very important. So I would say come with an open mind and just be teachable.
That's awesome. It brings up for me this idea of checking with yourself on the reasons for staying stuck and the reasons for getting unstuck.
Yes,
So,
perfect.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you both so much for being here with us today. That was an amazing conversation. I am imagining already all the thoughts and comments that are going to swirl around it in terms of it reaching people and serving people. So thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. We thank you for the
Thank you.
opportunity.
Thank you for having us.